Hello. Welcome to another episode of the Leap Takers podcast, the podcast for the curious, where I'm interviewing daring entrepreneurs, investors, and shapers in fascinating areas that affect the lives of our generations and the ones beyond. So this can include thematic areas as consumer technology, traveling, gaming, or crypto, as in the case of today's guest. So who am I talking about? His name is Stefano Bernardi. He is an active angel investor on AngelList and with his own angel investment firm called Mission and Market. I'm very excited to have him on this show because I've been following him on Twitter for quite a while. I really appreciate his interesting views, and he also has quite an interesting story, which we will dive into in this episode. To finish the short bio, he founded a Silicon Valley startup called Kickpay. And more recently, he's also part of Atomico's angel program. Atomico is a big and quite prestigious venture capital investor in Europe. And in his role as a scout, he focuses exclusively on investing in Planet Plus companies. So these are teams that are trying to save the planet from the imminent climate crisis. Furthermore, he is very strongly involved in the whole crypto community as the executive director of the AragonProject, as well as the author of the popular Token Economy newsletter. As always, I would like to kick off this episode with a short quote. So this time it's a quote from Sam Altman. He is the chairman of Y Combinator, which we will also talk about in this episode. So here comes the quote, which is more actually a few sentences of life advice that I really enjoy. You get truly rich by owning things that increase rapidly in value. Time only scales linearly. Hence, you need to own equity in something instead of just selling your time. The best way to make things that increase rapidly in value is by making things people want at scale. One more thing before we get started, you might notice some bird sounds in the background and some children playing. This is because Stefano was recording this in a park. So I hope it's not too distracting, but it should be fine. So having said that, let's get started with today's episode. I hope you will enjoy it. Hi, Stefano. Welcome to the podcast. I'm very happy that you could make this work, and I really appreciate you coming on the show since I know that you have quite a lot of stuff on your plate as well with all your involvements that we will get to as well in this podcast.
Happy to do it. Thanks a lot for having me.
Very cool. So maybe to get started, could you just give people that are not that familiar with you a really quick intro what you're working on right now? Or kind of how would you introduce yourself if you meet someone at the cocktail party or something?
Oh, I would probably lie. I would say, I'm an artist or something, just because it's pretty complicated to explain the current situation. But I'm doing a few things right now. I'm spending most of my time with Aragon, which is a crypto project that aims to build the infrastructure for decentralized autonomous organizations to happen and to transact between themselves. At the same time, I do a fair bit of investing in both with angel deals and through Atomico's angel program, as well as helping a family office invest in venture funds. And I'm also involved with another venture fund that we started here that invests in centralized projects, and that should be announced fairly soon as well.
Cool. Yeah, I think there's a lot we can dig into later. And I think what I was really interested in as a first talking point would be, I read that you moved to San Francisco, I think around 2011, if that's correct. I'm really interested because this is called the Leap Takers podcast, how you made this kind of probably a big decision to move from Italy to San Francisco and get involved with the startup scene there. So I would love to, if you kind of walk me how you made this decision and how this all played out.
Yeah, so I mean, it was a fairly easy decision. So I was working in Milan in a very small venture capital firm, which I joined right after college, even though I did computer engineering. And, I was, doing the traditional associate jobs of looking at deals and doing diligence and stuff like that. But the speed of the Italian ecosystem was just particularly slow. And so it got a bit boring after a while, that being 1.5 years. And then we also didn't like too much staying in a city anymore. We were biking to work, but felt all the pollution, and it just, it just felt like it was the right time to take a leap. And so we just decided we were going to move to SF and look for work there, and join a startup to see how it also was done on the other side. So I felt a bit of a fraud investing without having ever been inside of a startup and knowing actually what was going on. And so I thought, obviously, SF is the best place in the world to go do that. So let's just move there. And we moved there for 3 months looking for jobs. And, if it didn't work out, then we would have had 3 months vacation and could come back home and find other jobs home or, anywhere else in Europe. Fortunately, it worked out. And so, turns out it was a good decision after all.
Mm-hmm. And saying we, did you go there with your friend or your partner or?
Yeah, I went there with my now wife.
Oh, okay. So was it really like you did not have a position lined up when you moved there? So it was really like you went there and started.
Yeah. And plus didn't know that many people. There were a few Italian people there that we knew, and actually one rented us his house for the time being there, which was about to be teared down to be renovated. So it was a pretty old thing, but it was awesome in Woodside. One of those like crazy. Now it's a gigantic mansion, but it wasn't like that. But anyways, deers in the garden and stuff. So it was really beautiful. And but we didn't know anyone. Thankfully, one thing that I did at the time was I applied for Dave Mickler's shadowing position. So I think he just invested in this company that did internships or something, and as a way to boost, help them with growth marketing and stuff, they created this internship to shadow Dave Mickler. And turns out that I won that, but I didn't know before I left. I knew when I was there, and so I also did that for a couple of weeks when I was there.
And now looking back, do you have any advice for people who want to do a similar move, like also move to SF to jump into the startup world? Like any resources or any ways you best approach these startups, or where you meet the people that could help you get a position?
I think that now it's a bit different, meaning that when I moved there were still H-1B visas available. And right now I think that, obviously the quota is taken up every single year. So it might be a bit more different and a bit harder to just, plain move there, because I've had many, many friends that moved in the years after I did, that even though they moved there, found a job, then, their visa just didn't make the cut in the lottery. So that's certainly something to keep in mind, that, it might very well be that it's a not successful thing. So, but otherwise, what I did is I had a very clear idea in mind of the type of startup that I wanted to join, which was, sub 10 people, fintech / APIs, which were the things that I was interested in and I knew a bit about. But that being said, I also did interviews and tried with many other companies that were in different sectors, different stages, just, to make sure that I covered all options. But the community there is very welcoming, or at least it was. We're talking about 8 years ago, and it takes very little time to get to know a lot of people. So going to meetups, going to events, and things like that. For me, it turns out it came from an introduction from an entrepreneur that pitched us at the venture firm, the job that I ended up getting, but. Otherwise, right now there's just such a boom where it shouldn't be too hard.
Okay. I also read a really interesting part that I think you met the Collison brothers that later founded Stripe there. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah. So I kept on hearing, from a few people about this Stripe company. And so, I called Outreach and I said, I heard about you guys and I'm looking for a job in this specific sector. And they did not have I tried to get hired as a developer evangelist there, and they were like 6 or 7 people at the time, maybe 8. And they did not have that position open. They were not hiring, but I tried to convince them. And I also went and did a full day test with Stripe, and there were, obviously 2000 brothers and Billy and Greg, and the designer from Sweden, who is, I forgot his name, but like an insanely talented group of people all in the same room. This old Mexican-looking Palo Alto house. It was pretty epic. And but yeah, they ended up not hiring developer evangelists for a long, long time, saying, rightly so, probably, that they wanted just engineers to talk to their customers and not have another layer in there. And so it didn't work out, but it was still a cool experience.
Could you already tell back then? I mean, you said insanely talented group.
Oh, it was absolutely obvious that it would have been ginormous. If I had any money, I would have left a luggage of cash in there easily.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, because now I think current valuation like 22 billion or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It was so, I like, if all startups were so obvious, then venture investors, it would be a different type of job.
Yeah, very interesting. And so I think after you joined several or startups in the Bay Area, do you have any takeaways there regarding your experience for working for them? Like how was that regarding like the tasks you did, the learning experiences you got, the hours, all of these things? Just sound really interesting to me.
Yeah, I mean, I only worked for one, and then I founded my own. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a great employee, right? So I've always, I was doing investing on the side. I was like researching other things, and it the the cool thing was that I was able to have a role which touched both engineering, product, biz dev, and a bit of everything. So I was in contact with the users of the platforms, and as well internally, and the developers internally. And so that afforded me a lot of variability and a lot of visibility as well. So that kept me really interested. But I think it really depends on the personality of the person. I saw people in sales that they picked up the phone and smiles popped out of their faces, and for me, I couldn't even think about spending time doing that, right? So and obviously developers enjoy what they do, and even though I enjoy that, I'm not sure I would enjoy it every day of my life, right? So I think on that sense, the takeaways will be very different, just depending on the person. In terms of hours, it's very varied. What I can say is that I think hours are a very good predictor of the success of a startup. And so, even though now I'm an advocate of, like not killing yourself for work, unfortunately, I think that the reality is that if you want to build anything that is ginormous and the number one company in your space, then it was very clear that the companies that had people there on Saturday and Sundays and after dinner and stuff were going to be the ones that were going to do better than the others. But otherwise, in most companies, like at Five, there's
I mean, I fully agree with that. I think you need to have that conviction that you're really going to build something amazing and have the passion to really work on it like a lot. Yeah, then you said you founded afterwards your own company. Was that Mission and Market, the angel investor?
No, so I found it. I found it both at the same time. So Mission Market was my angel fund that I created with two of my friends there in SF. We raised $3 million from people in Italy and Europe to give them access to deals in San Francisco. And the reason was that we were seeing a lot of cool deals and really wanted to invest, but we had absolutely no money at the time. And so we decided that could be a cool way, and turned out it did, and it was a great decision. But the company I founded was called Kickpay. It was a receivables financing company, so peer-to-peer invoice financing. And with that one, we did YC, then raised the seed round, and did all the usual kind of Bay Area path.
You mentioned there that you, for one, raised the fund from investors in Europe to give access to these deals, and then also you went out to raise money for your own company. I'm very interested in the whole fundraising process. So how did you approach this? Like, did you just do a cold outreach to investors and said, this is what I'm doing, or how did this play out?
Well, so for the company, we did a very small round. I think we raised like 200K or something like that. Very small round with, few investors that we already knew. So that was, everyone says that, which I understand is not particularly helpful to people that don't know any investors, but the reality is that is often how it works, right? So it's either mentors that you have or people that you worked with before, or, I was very interested in investing, and so I had built a bit of a network of angels and other people of that kind. So that was easy. And then after that, we got into YC. And then, the seed round happened extremely fast after YC just because of the push that you get from that program.
Can you just maybe elaborate on YC for people or listeners that don't?
Oh, YC is Y Combinator, which is, the original accelerator that started in Boston with a program and Jessica Livingston, and then moved to the Bay Area, and now is a giant accelerator that churns out 150 or so companies every 6 months. We were one of the first giant batches of 100 companies. And yeah, you have a demo day at the end where there's essentially all the investors in the valley that come to hear you. Then they can, like you on the page. And then after that, it's assuming your company has, the right ingredients, which no one really knows what they are, and they're not particularly correlated with future success, then it's fairly easy to raise. But, there's companies that did YC, like Airbnb, that didn't really have a great time raising.
Okay. And so, yeah, you mentioned this was a kind of a big boost then to raise. And now, since you mentioned YC, and obviously this is a big stamp of quality and approval already if you get in. If you're still familiar with it, how does the application process look like? And do you have any advice you could give there to people?
Yeah, the application process is extremely simple. It's just a form with a bunch of questions. And I think it is extremely valuable because it has the questions are phrased in a way that really makes you think about what you're building and why and how it works. And so usually it's extremely helpful to do the application, even if you're not going to submit it, or you can submit it, whatever. But just the act of doing that is extremely helpful. And then after that, you submit it, and then you can either be called for an interview or just straight up rejected. And one time I had applied previously, and I had gotten an interview, but then we were rejected at the interview. We were just destroyed at the interview level. And so this time around, we knew what to expect, and we're much more prepared. So we, even though at the end we didn't really think that it went that great, but then they called us and they said that they wanted to have us in the batch, which was really cool. But otherwise, the number one advice would be, if you do get an interview, then definitely practice a lot with alumni, and many alumni. Every alumni is very happy to help with interview prep and mock interviews, and that's just a gigantic help.
Mm-hmm. And do you think it's also, next to the practice, is it also certain elements that you put into your pitch or into your interview that really kind of helped you get approved?
I mean, it's just a general thing of being really concise and driving the points that you want to drive, and so not, writing a lot of things and then not saying anything at the very end. That plus, really knowing your customers, your market, and your product, and why people would want to use it, and how they're solving the current problem right now. But having an answer to everything, or if you don't have an answer, admitting that. But I mean, you probably should still have an answer, something like that, unless it's something that you can say, okay, we know this is a problem, and we're trying to solve it X, Y, and Z, and we don't know what is going to be the right way. But yeah, I think it's very simple. If you know your stuff, and what you're building makes sense, meaning that there's people out there that will want it, and you're the right team for that, then it's fairly straightforward.
So let me jump a bit ahead now. And I think you then decided to leave SF and return to Europe. So kind of what were the reasons to go back and what happened next?
So there were multiple reasons for going back. I had lost my dad just a few weeks before YC started, so that kind of accumulated a bit, and we also had a kid at the time, and the fund and the startup, and my wife had a startup, so I think we were just getting a bit burned out, and then we were not sure that we wanted to raise our kids in the U.S. We certainly could not afford to have any other kids there, and we could not afford any houses or anything like that. So it was really a mix of factors and decisions, and also just a general overarching decision of not having work or success in work as the number one thing that you optimize for in life. And so, yeah, we decided to move back to Europe and chose a little spot in the Italian Dolomites as the home base. And we've been here for 3 months now. 3 years. Been here for 3 years. We're now going to Australia for a bit, for at least 6 or 7 months, and then we'll see.
Okay, I think this would be a good time to say a little bit about Aragon and the whole crypto topic. So I don't want to dive too deep into it because I know it's a very complex topic, but is there a way you could tell people a little bit what Aragon is doing and kind of why it matters?
Yes, of course. So there's a few reasons why Aragon was started and a few reasons why I joined, but essentially what Aragon is trying to do is to give that power to the people in order to be able to collaborate with each other and transact in a completely trustless and censorship-resistant way. So right now, any way that you have to collaborate with other people usually is just, you create a company offline, you have to pay a lot of fees, a lot of taxes, lots of bureaucracy, and then it's a fully trustful environment, meaning that you have to trust, the board, you have to trust the managers, the employees, whoever controls the bank accounts and things like that. And also, that infrastructure is not available everywhere and it's not available to everyone. Banks will not open bank accounts if your company does something that they don't like, and there's a lot of things that they don't like, even if they are fully legal and fully legit. And so Aragon is a way to create DAOs, which are decentralized autonomous organizations, which are organizations that are built completely online, completely on right now on Ethereum, so on a blockchain infrastructure, and no one can really stop them. Once you've created a DAO and you have capital in there, then that is not censorable by anyone. So you can use it for whatever you prefer, and yeah, that's probably the easy to understand bit, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was definitely helpful. And Aragon, so I think the association, it's based in Zug, Switzerland, right?
That's right.
But I think the people working for it are also, it's like distributed and there's different teams working on it. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's a fully distributed and fully decentralized development scheme where the founders had raised some money in an Estonian entity, and then they decided to move to Switzerland. And in the process, they also decided to decentralize the governance and the development of the project. So they created a new for-profit company for themselves, and then they created the association, which has all the treasury. And so I am at the association level, where we manage the treasury and we give grants to companies that are working on the Aragon network. And so obviously the biggest company is the one that the founders created, and there's 17 people in there working full time. And so we give them, we don't decide anything essentially, because the token holders, Aragon has a token called ANT, Aragon Network Token, and the token holders have quarterly votes where they can allocate capital to projects that requested. And so Aragon 1, which is the company the founders created, asked for $4 million at the beginning of the year, and the Aragon token holders approved it. So we give them the $4 million, but we're not, in charge of making these decisions. We just execute them. The only decisions that we make at the association level are around, the treasury management and having a plan to make sure that we're still going to have some capital in the coming years. And then there's two other teams that applied. One is Autark, the other one is Aragon Black, that got approved by token holders. And so these teams, they now are working full time on Aragon as well. And one is 10 people, and the other one is 8 people. So in that way, the founders have essentially removed the possibility that them leaving would destroy the project, because if they left today, everything would still work. We would still have capital. We would still have other teams working on it, and we're just at the beginning. So as we add more teams, then the project becomes even more resilient.
Yeah, I think it's very valuable what you're building, or what these different teams are building with Aragon. And I guess it could also be interesting for listeners of the podcast if they're building a company that is maybe more decentralized in nature, or like that works with remote teams from all over, that this could be an interesting option to look at in the future to handle the governance of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that right now, the perfect use case is for online only companies. And so not many companies that need to interact with the offline world. And for these, this is still perfect. There's still, something to work on in terms of enabling fiat payments for these companies, for example, but all things that we're working on.
Great, yeah. So I'll definitely also link to Aragon and some of the things you said earlier, like YC, etc., in the show notes, just for the listeners. And yeah, I think now it would be a good place to quickly switch gears to some of my more personal questions that I like to end the interviews with. So I think first one would be, what are some of your favorite knowledge resources or books that you would recommend to people? It can be in any area. It's just something that you find valuable.
I find Twitter very valuable. It is usually my number one kind of information gathering space, especially for stuff around crypto. It's just, the conversations move so fast that whatever you're going to read in a book form or any other form is going to be outdated. So that, real-time information is really the only one that's worth looking at, specifically for that space. And then I do listen to a lot of podcasts as well, and I don't think that I want to kind of recommend any, because I tend to switch to whatever I am interested in at the moment. So I do listen to a few general ones like Tim Ferriss and things like that, where maybe you can discover some things that you don't really know that you were interested in. But otherwise, for example, with books, I might be reading like 10 books at the same time, and I'll just choose on whatever I have more top of mind during that time. So right now I'm reading a lot about psychedelics, for example. So I'm reading How to Change Your Mind and listening to a few podcasts around there. But I'm also listening.
That's from Michael Pollan, right?
That's right, yeah. It's pretty fascinating. But I'm also listening to a lot of things around water and water conservation and restoration. So the book I'm listening to right now is Elixir. And so it'll just vary quite a lot for me.
And are there any specific people that you would recommend people to follow on Twitter? Like kind of the ones you always read the tweets of?
Again, very, very different depending on what you're looking for. So I wouldn't say I have,
maybe let's say crypto or investing.
Again, crypto. So the thing is that with Twitter now, I don't even know who it is that I follow anymore, because they show you stuff, this guy retweeted this guy liked this guy follows this other guy. So there's just so many, and the reality is that you don't want to follow someone just because you expect them consistently having a great content. I find that it's better to follow a wide variety of people, and then you'll see pop up interesting stuff more often. So unfortunately, no, I don't have any single must follow.
That's all right. Good. Then next question. What is one of the best or most worthwhile investments that you've ever made? So it could be investment in money, with money, or time, energy, etc.
There's quite a few. It would be very hard to choose just one. Obviously, making the move to SF has been a great energy and also money investment and time, as well as raising my first fund. Just show me how investing really worked on the other side of the ocean. Raising a kid would probably also fit in there, and as would participate in the Ethereum ICO. So yeah, I mean, all of them in there, depending on the mix between money, time, and energy.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Of course.
If you have any advice to your younger self, I mean, it goes a bit into the same direction, but do you have any advice, like, let's say yourself 5 or 10 years ago?
I don't think so. I wouldn't change much of what I did, really. I just really take things as they come, and I don't have any long-term plans, right? So oftentimes you'll hear people say, oh, you need to have a plan, you need to visualize it in your head, you need to go after that. But for me, it's like, we have one life. It's also short, so I don't obsess over having, success or like achieving goals or anything like that. So I would keep it that way, just like do whatever it feels right in the moment, and, like stuff will sort out itself.
Very good words. So maybe my second last question would be, do you have any unusual hobby or routine that, helps you also to kind of get away from when you work for Aragon and all your investment commitments as well?
I wish I should actually, but I don't. What I enjoy is just reading I enjoy reading the local newspaper here. When I go, the morning have breakfast. It just kind of grounds you a bit to what other people really have top of mind, because we're thinking about like game changing things and disrupting this and disrupting that, and then the reality of the day-to-day lives of many people are rooted on much different problems, like, oh, they're building this road, or they're redoing this building, or stuff like that, right? Or you can't, we have wolves in this area, and like they're not going to let us kill the wolves, or something like that, right? So I find that it takes my it grounds me a bit, but otherwise, obviously, just meditation, stuff like that.
Okay. And my last question, which I ask every guest due to the name of the podcast, is, what does courage mean to you?
So courage, I think, is, there's a little definition, which is being scared but still doing something anyways, which I think works fine for as a definition, but it's very general. But for me, I would say that courage is really, not subscribing to the status quo and accepting that something is the way that it is, and that it has to be that way. Or that you have to be that way, right? So I find that the most courageous people are the ones that just, think with their own heads and do whatever they think is best. And even if, everyone else says that, that's wrong or they're crazy. So, yeah.
Very interesting and very good to hear your thoughts on all the topics you covered. So thank you very much for coming on the podcast, Stefano. I think it was very valuable for me and hopefully also for the listeners. So if people want to follow you, what you're up to, like on Twitter, for example, where can they find you?
Twitter, Stefano Bernardi, first and last name. I should probably get something shorter, but that's about it for now.
Okay, great. Good. Yeah, as said, I will list everything as well in the show notes. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on the show, Stefano.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was fun.
Hey everyone, here is Remo again. One more thing before you head off. If you enjoyed this episode, please take 5 seconds and give the Leap Takers podcast on Apple Podcasts, on iTunes, or on Stitcher 5 stars. This would really mean a lot to me and also helps me to get exciting future guests to come on the show. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. Hopefully you got some good takeaways from today's episode with Stefano. I was really excited for him to come on. He's quite a big name in the crypto world. I forgot to mention he actually has a very popular newsletter called The Token Economy. So if you're somewhat interested in crypto and finding out about cool projects, etc., you can check out that newsletter. Last but not least, I'm very happy to hear your thoughts, your feedback about this show, what I can improve, ideas for future guests. So just shoot me a message. You should be able to find my contact info on my website, leaptakers.com, as well as you can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. You should find me if you type in Remo keywords. So have a good time. Until next time, bye-bye.